Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then, what right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Ah, humbug!
Don't be cross, uncle.
What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you? But a time for paying bills without money. A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen a month presented dead against you. If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart.
Uncle!
Nephew, you keep Christmas in your way and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Well, let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you.
There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow travelers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it.
Bob Cratchit, still in the tank, involuntarily applauds.
Let me hear another sound out of you, Mr. Cratchit. You'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. Oh, you're quite a powerful speaker, sir. And when you don't go into Parliament.
Oh, don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
Oh, I'll see you all right. I'll see you in hell first.
But why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. Good afternoon.
No, nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. So why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I've made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon!
His nephew left the room but stopped at the outer door to bestow the greeting of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially.
There's another fellow, my clerk, with 15 shillings a week, a wife and family, talking about Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam.
The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands, and they bowed to him.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
This festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at this present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Oh, plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
They are still. I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law are still in full vigor then?
Both very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you'd said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We chose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to remain anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and workhouses. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would die, then they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that.
But you might know it.
It's not my business. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
At length the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge, dismounting from his stool, tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I were to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself mightily ill-used, I'd be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year, sir.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning.
Oh, I will, sir. I will indeed. Good night, sir, and Merry Christmas.
Bah, humbug!
The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide at the end of a lane of boys 20 times, in honor of it being Christmas Eve, and then ran home as hard as he could pelt to play at blindman's buff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy sweep of rooms. Nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of this house, except that it was very large. Also, the Scrooge had as little of what fancy about him as any man in the city of London. And yet, Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw the knocker, without its undergoing any immediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face.
Marley?
Marley's face, with a dismal light about it. Not angry or ferocious, but it looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. He said,
Bah, humbug!
He closed the door with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellar below appeared to have its separate peal of echoes. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly, too, trimming his candle as he went. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for its being very dark. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through the rooms to see that all was right. He had had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. A small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and a little saucepan of gruel upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. He closed his door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom. He took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the very low fire to take his gruel. His glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell, that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out, loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This was succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine cellars, in the merchant's wine cellar.
Scrooge!
Then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below. then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug. I still won't believe it.
The color leaves Scrooge's face, though, as the source of the noise comes on through the heavy door and passes into the room before Scrooge's very eyes. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tight, and boots. His body was transparent so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now, though he looked the phantom through and through and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of its death, cold eyes, and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about its head and chin, he was still incredulous.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Marley's voice, no doubt about it.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Well, who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Well, do it then.
Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace as if he were quite used to it.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a lot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than grave about you, whatever you are.
Ah!
At this, the spirit raises a frightful cry and shakes his chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge holds on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. Marley starts taking off the bandage round its head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors. When Marley's lower jaw drops down to his breast, Scrooge falls on his knees and claps his hand before his face.
Mercy, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe me or not?
I do. I must. Why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit does not go forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness.
You are fettered. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard, and I girded it on my own free will. And of my own free will I wore it. It is the pattern strange to you. Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full and heavy as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Scrooge glances about him on the floor in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he sees nothing.
Jacob. Oh, Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole.
But you were always a good man of business.
Business? Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business.
It held up its chain at arm's length as if that were the cause of his unwilling grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again.
At this time of the rolling year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to the poor abode? Were there no poor homes in which its light would have conducted me? Hear me, my time is nearly gone.
I will, but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray.
I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and a hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring, Ebenezer.
Oh, thank you. You always were a good friend to me. Thank you.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?
It is.
Yeah, I think I'd rather not.
Without their visit, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow night when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I just take them all at once and have it over with, Jacob?
Expect the second on the night of the same hour, the third on the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us.
It walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the apparition reached it, it was wide open. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. Scrooge tried to say, "Humbug," but stopped at the very first syllable. And being from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep on the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly.
Was it a dream or not?
Scrooge lay in this state until the chime had gone 3/4 more, when he remembered, on a sudden, that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past.
A quarter past. Half past. A quarter to it. The hour itself, and nothing else.
Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn by a strange figure like a child. Yet not so like a child, as like an old man. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age. And yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. Though the strangest thing about it was, from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using its duller moments a great extinguisher for a cat, which it now held under its arm.
Are you the spirit sir, whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
What business brings you here?
Your welfare.
Well, I'm much obliged, but I wonder if a good night's sleep would be more conducive to that end.
Your reclamation, then. Take heed, rise, and walk with me.
It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes. That bed was warm and the thermometer a long way below freezing, that he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown, and a nightcap.
I am mortal and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand there, and you shall be upheld in more than this.
Scrooge touches the ghost's heart and they pass through the wall. Scrooge and the ghost stand on an open, sunlit country road with fields on either hand. It's a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground. Scrooge looks about and claps his hands together.
Good heavens! I was bred in this place. I was a boy here.
The spirit gazed upon him mildly. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek?
It's a pimple. I beg you, spirit, lead me where you would.
And that bleak building over there?
Oh, that building. I was a boy there. I went to school in that horrible place.
You recollect the way?
Remember it? I could walk it blindfold.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on.
They walked along the road. Scrooge points out every gate, post, and tree. Some shaggy ponies with boys upon their backs trot down the road towards Scrooge and the ghost. The boys call to other boys in country gigs and carts, driven by farmers. All are in great spirits and shout to each other.
These are but the shadows of things that have been. They have no consciousness of us. The school is not quite deserted. Look through the window into that cold, barren room. A solitary child, neglected by his family,
Yes.
alone.
Yes, I see. I know that boy. Oh, I was so lonely. Poor boy.
Come, Ebenezer Scrooge, let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's younger self suddenly morphs into an older boy, and the room becomes a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrink, the windows crack, fragments of plaster fall out of the ceiling, but his former self is still alone. All the other boys have gone home again for the holidays. Scrooge looks at the ghost and with a mournful shaking of his head, glances anxiously toward the door. It opens, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, stands at the threshold looking in. It's Scrooge's sister, Fan. The elder Scrooge is amazed to see her.
Fan.
Dear, dear brother, I've come to bring you home, dear brother.
Home, little Fan?
Yes, home, for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home is like heaven.
Well, for you perhaps, but not for me.
Well, he spoke so gently to me one dear night, I was not afraid to ask him if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and set me in a coach to bring you. And you're to be a man, and are never to come back here. But first, we're to be together all the Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world.
Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered, but she had a large heart.
Yes, she had.
She died a woman, and I think she had children.
One child.
Drew, your nephew, Fred.
Yes.
Come, Ebenezer Scrooge, let us see another Christmas.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood in the busy thoroughfares of the city. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that there, too, it was Christmas time. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door.
Do you know this place, Ebenezer Scrooge?
Know it? No, it's the counting house where I was apprenticed.
They went in. At sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he'd been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement.
Why, it's old Fezziwig, bless his heart. It's Fezziwig alive again, and hosting one of his Christmas parties.
Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, and called out in a comforting, jovial voice,
Yo ho there, Ebenezer and Dick!
a living and moving picture of Scrooge's former self. A young man came briskly and accompanied by his fellow prentice.
Dick Wilkins, my fellow apprentice. Oh, to be sure, bless me. Yes, there he is. Oh, he was very much attached to me, was Dick. Oh, poor Dick, dear, dear.
Yo ho, my boys! No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas Eve. Oh, Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up before a man can say Jack Robinson. Clear away, my lads. I must have a lot of room here. Clear away.
There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and tuned like 50 stargates.
Well done.
There were dances and more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Top couple, too, they shone in every part of the dance. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on every side of the door, either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas.
A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. He spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 pounds at most. Is that so much that he deserves your praise?
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, and things so slight and insignificant that it's impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune.
He felt the spirit's glance and stopped.
What's the matter?
Nothing particular.
Something, I think.
No, I should just like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
My time grows short.
Again, he saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a black dress, in whose eyes there were tears.
It matters little to you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve.
What idol has displaced you?
A golden one.
This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which is so hard as poverty. There is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth.
Oh, you fear the world too much. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one, until the master passion gain engrosses you.
Oh, what then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you.
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feelings tell you that you were not what you are. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no,
In
never.
what then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit. If this had never been between us, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now?
You think not.
Oh, I would gladly think otherwise if I could. But if you were free, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You who weighs everything by gain, with a full heart for the love of him you once were. I release you now from our engagement.
He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she resumed.
May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me?
I told you, these are the shadows of things that have been, but they are what they are. Do not blame me.
Remove me. I cannot bear it. Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright. He seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. As he struggled with the spirit, he was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cat a parting squeeze in which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.